and welcome to another episode of the Veterans Corner. The Veterans Corner is a show dedicated to our veterans, their families, and to all the all those who support the veterans. My name's Chuck Wooden, and I'll be your host. Lately, we've been hitting the topic of Agent Orange. It's a subject that, in one way or another, it affects a large segment of the population. If you are a relative, friend, or even a coworker of a Vietnam veteran, you probably have seen the effects of Agent Orange. Even the children of these veterans who have been exposed to Agent Orange, it affects a lot of people. And with us today, we've got a great panel. We really do. We've got, to my far right, we have Angelina Blankshin. She is a Blue Water Navy veteran advocate, and it's on behalf of her father, who is a Navy veteran. And next, in the middle, we have Chuck Mason. He is a Vietnam veteran, Blue Water veteran. And we have Paul Scapatici.
That's good.
I got it. Did I get it?
That's right.
It was okay.
That's great.
Everybody that watches this show knows that I am bad with names, but I got it. And Paul is also a Blue Water veteran. Usually I ask what branch and all that, but we know we got some Navy veterans here. What was your rate in the Navy?
Go ahead, I'll let you go first.
You know what? I'll go right down the line.
Yep, there you go.
That works. I was electrician's mate, second class.
That's right. We had talked about that. We were close. Hull techs and electricians.
Yes.
And which ship were you on? Ship for a long time, right? Same ship?
Same ship. USS Prairie, AD-15. It was a destroyer tender. It was a World War II vintage ship.
Oh.
Yeah. Wow.
Chuck?
I was an ADJ in the Navy, which is an aviation machinist mate, jets. I ended up going to school in Memphis, Tennessee, and I worked on F-4 Phantoms with Fighter Squadron VF-51, the Screaming Eagles, my whole time in the Navy. Yep.
Carriers, obviously.
On aircraft carriers, yep. I was on the USS Coral Sea and also on the FDR.
Yeah. Now, you guys had served, obviously, in Vietnam. About what years?
I was there in 1973, March 1973. I don't know how long we were there.
Yeah. I was there in 1975, the fall of Saigon. I was involved in that. And also the rescue of the USS Maguas, the merchant marine ship that was captured by the Cambodians. That was part of another mission that I was involved in.
Yeah. Angelina, your father.
My father served 20 years in the Navy. He's a 20-year veteran. Served on a few ships, but in Vietnam he served on the USS Chicago. And he was there in 1964-65.
Yeah. What was his rate?
He was on the deck force. I think it was a bosun's mate at the time.
Yeah,
That's
bosun's
correct.
mate. Yeah. When did you end up off the coast of Vietnam, and did you know the mission at the time? Actually, did you know what was going on? Was it put out to the crew?
When I went to Vietnam, I was 17 years old on an aircraft carrier. Yeah. When I joined the Navy, I was in the Navy about a week after I turned 17. So I quickly went through boot camp, and then I was grateful enough to be able to go to aviation machinist mate school in Mississippi. And after that, they quickly sent me out to some more training and then out to the fleet. And I ended up on the carrier Coral Sea with Fighter Squadron 51 in 1975. And next thing I know, we were involved in the evacuation of Saigon. When you're on a deck, you don't really have a clue as to what's going on. You have a job. You have 12, 18-hour days, on the boat.
That's a short day.
And that's a short day, yeah. So, that was my time, the short time. I just caught the tail end of the war.
Yeah. And I actually missed it by 4 years. I went in 79. Mm-hmm. So, and Saigon was in 75, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool.
I did not know the mission until a few years back. I found out. I do remember that we were in the South China Sea on one evening, and I distinctly remember after chow, and that the old man, that's captain
Yep.
for those who aren't Navy,
Yep.
came over the 1MC, yes, the 1MC.
I haven't heard that term in a long
Oh, I
time.
bet. And he announced to the crew that we had just received orders to Vietnam, and that was it. I was 23 years old. I had been on the ship 3 years by then, so I was quite experienced at my job, taking care of all the electrical systems on board the ship.
You know, I mean, we're obviously here to talk about blue water veterans.
Right.
And I think I might have skipped that in the beginning. But I mean, we've had Jerry Wright on the show a number of times, actually, in the recent past. And we've talked about the Agent Orange and how it affected the troops, you know, on land. But what a lot of people don't realize, it really affected our blue water veterans.
More so.
Yeah.
I have a brother who is a Purple Heart recipient. He was on the ground in Vietnam. He shows no signs of Agent Orange that I'm aware of. I should say maybe not, but I mean, he doesn't have like the physical aspects of it that I know of, you know. But a lot of the blue water Navy guys who drank the water on the ships, that went through the distillation systems, a lot of the guys that I was on the ship with that I keep in contact with today are ill with various diseases that are listed on the list of Agent Orange exposure. And I can say that for myself, when I was on the ship, steaming off of Vietnam for, had to be over a week, maybe almost 2 weeks at a time. The water that we drank was contaminated with what we thought was jet fuel, JP5, in our tanks. And everybody drank it. It came out of the faucet that way. You could see it. You could see the color of the fuel. You could taste it, smell it, separate it in your drink when you went to the chow hall. You know, because it would come out of what we call the bug juice machines.
Yep,
I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I think if you took
Another term I haven't heard
we
in a
could
long
actually
time.
sit there and let the JP5 separate from the top of the bug juice, and then take a napkin and wipe it off and drink it.
And you're also showering, so you're
And we
in
were
constant
showering
contact
and
with
everything, yeah.
with
And
the
that's all we
JP5.
had. And I don't know if they can, being just someone on the ship such as myself, as with a flight crew, we don't know where they're getting the water from. That's not our mission. My mission is to keep the aircraft flying, and their mission is to give us water and food and keep the crews going, and they gave us what they had, apparently. And there a lot of times what they would do for ships is they bring barges out. They get fresh water and bring barges out to the ship. Well, that, for some reason, that didn't happen, for us. So we drank what we had, and a lot of us got sick, and I am one of the people who got Agent Orange diseases, and I have approximately 5 of them at this point.
Well, we're going to talk more about that later, but that's why we do these shows, to bring awareness to the public and to help the causes of the House bills that we're also going to discuss. And incidentally, to our viewers, this is going to be a 2-part series. There's so much to cover on this topic that actually we could probably make this a 3-part series. But right now we've got it as a 2-part series.
I have more information. Chuck mentioned the evaporators. Naval ships take in salt water. So they heat up the water to burn off the salt. Well, that takes the dioxin, Agent Orange, and increases the toxicity. Our government did studies on the water and found that the toxicity of the Agent Orange was thousands of times more than on the ground. So as he mentioned, it was in our coffee, in our bug juice, our food was cooked in this water, and we showered in it. I have several other shipmates who also have the same illnesses, besides myself. Now you're going to talk
People
about it
like
later.
us did not know that. We had no clue. We're young guys working on a ship, along with your dad, and people like, all of us that are supporting the cause, and they're supposed to be taken care of, but we're drinking the poison in the water.
Well, they didn't know it either,
And they didn't
obviously.
know it either. I mean, they didn't do it on purpose, obviously, but even though the mistake was made back then, now we have a different issue today, obviously.
Well, past shows, like I said, when Jerry was on, and I know that we talked about, he was giving us examples of how it got to the water. Right. And it was just 55-gallon drums that were just dumped, into the rivers, which ended up into the oceans. And you guys were just a couple miles off the coast, I'm sure.
I think that if you follow the currents of the water like they do everywhere else, and they found out that it travels quite a distance, hundreds of miles, that you can get contamination. You see it with the oil spills, you see it with this and that, fuel spills in the ocean. It's the same thing. And so, a lot of people obviously were affected. And now the other thing is that our government is helping, but they're helping the Vietnamese with the tragedy that happened there. There's millions and millions of dollars being spent in Vietnam, which is fine. I'm great with that. That's awesome. But they're not helping the guys like us or the people or like her father who honorably served in the military for all those years and got sick. And now it's a known cause. The studies have been done by the Australian government on it. They did some really big research on this, and they found out that, as you said, in the distillation systems, it magnified it 100 times or more, which made the dioxin even more potent. And a lot of the blue water sailors, even in the Australian Army, got way sicker than the troops on the ground. And that's what they're finding out. So now we're on the waiting list. For us, it's kind of a wait and see what happens to the end.
I think at the time that the sailors were serving over there, they probably thought that we're in the safest place you could be. We're not in combat. We're not being shot at. Life is great, but there's, they're having a good time. And then 20, years later, they start to have these diseases that they say, wow, this, 1, 2 diseases, maybe this is what it is. But then when you start to see that these aren't diseases that are part of my life, my family's medical history. And somebody like my dad who served 20 years, and my dad did what he was told. And, my dad never used the VA system for health care, so it was never really brought up. And he's had so many problems, health issues. Many of them are on the list. It wasn't until, last year we thought he had a stroke. And I said, something's not right here. And I served in Southington on the water board for 10 years, and I know firsthand, the consequences of having pollutants in the water. And when we went to see the neurologist, the specialist, and he said, your dad didn't have a stroke. He has this condition called myasthenia gravis. And I said, well, what is that? And he said, well, it's this rare, non-curable condition. And I thought about that, and I thought about all the other, and I said, wait a minute, let's stop right now. Let's stop. And I really wasn't, I've heard people my whole life talk about Agent Orange, but I didn't really say, well, that never affected my family, so I never got involved in it. And then, just recently I said, there's something to this. And so I'm trying to catch up now. And I'm finding though that, a lot of people that have it, but there's not a lot of people getting help for it,
Right, and that's what we're advocating for today. A lot of people aren't coming forward. They have a disease. They're saying, well, it's either aging or this or that. But if you were a veteran and you fought in that theater, or even a lot of veterans today, that's still, because this chemical is still out there.
Yes.
It hasn't disappeared, and it's still in storage. So, you still have people that are still getting ill from it.
It mixes with salt water or fresh water. There's no way to neutralize it. And, with spraying 21 million gallons of Agent Orange in Vietnam from 61 to 71, think about the runoff into the ocean. And like Chuck here said, that they're spending billions on their cleanup and their sick people, yet they put us veterans, both boots on the ground and blue water, back on the back burner, and our government forgets about us.
Yep. As
Jerry's hat says, and I have a hat that says sprayed and betrayed. Yep. Our government betrayed us. And it's sad that they still can't take care of us.
It's all about the dollar.
And that's unfortunate.
Only about the money.
Very unfortunate.
Additionally, you had sailors like my dad that worked on the deck force. The dioxin floated in the air. It came, the mist. Yeah. It didn't just drop. It was carried forward. So they were also breathing it in. It landed.
From showers.
It landed on the aircrafts. It landed on the ships. The sailors that were cleaning aircraft that, sprayed this in Vietnam. So they were exposed to it, water too, but also through the air.
it was also brought alongside carriers by other ships. You have your ballast tanks. You should know about that.
Yeah.
So they'd fill the ballast tanks with seawater, right? If you're putting contaminated water and you're pulling up alongside an aircraft carrier, and then you empty ballast tanks to shift the ship's weight, and that ship's taking it in through the evaporators.
Yep. I forgot how many. I mean, as a hull tech, I did know this at one time, but there's so many gallons on the intakes a minute.
Oh God.
Hundreds. And, I mean,
Cooling water.
1,000?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much water that's being drawn from the ocean. You're talking like an aircraft carrier. I was on a frigate. A small frigate. I mean, 438 feet. That's considered small compared to a carrier,
Right.
a destroyer, and the cruisers. But just on a frigate, I forgot there was something. There was an outrageous amount of water that was being drawn from the ocean per minute to cool off the.
Oh yeah, you have to have thousands and thousands of gallons of cooling water brought into the ship, and then so you also have probably some suction for water in there, and
Well,
I don't know
into
how
the
they take it.
evaporators, but also you have to think about the amount of water the boilers use, and it has to be fresh water. You
Right.
can't do salt. And that was another thing that it's been brought up about from our, the VA, that, there's a kind of not written rule, but you don't take in salt water so close to the shore. But when you have boilers that need thousands of gallons of water, you just can't stop taking the water in.
No,
So
you
if you're
can't.
7 miles off the coast, we're still going to do it.
Yeah.
So
You have to.
that's not written in stone
Yeah.
for Navy captains.
Now, I had a whole list of questions, but we've actually gone into a real nice conversation there. I know the next show, we got Jerry coming back, so there'll be 4 of us on the panel.
Good, that'd be great.
So it's just a great addition to tie everything that we're talking about and to refresh the memory of the viewers from the shows that we've done in the past, recent past. Now, when did you get involved as an advocate for the Blue Water?
When I first developed type 2 diabetes and realized I had no family history, and I knew through a friend about my ship being on the fleet reserve list, that's when I started looking into it and thinking about my shipmates and other blue water sailors. Because one thing the government did do is there was an Agent Orange Act of 1991. It gave everybody, including Blue Water Navy veterans, benefits. In 2002, somebody within this VA system took it away. So it's only right. They acknowledged it, that the ships were contaminated. Our government did studies on it. And Chuck, you mentioned Australia and New Zealand. They operated along with us. They did studies, they gave them to our government, but our government won't accept them. And they've taken care of their sailors for the last 35 years with benefits.
That was actually going to be a question I was going to ask. Well, no, I'm glad you brought it up.
Well, it kind of rolls into.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Unfortunately, we have to look to the Australian Navy, who to do these studies on their own. They're the ones who came up to do the study on their own, wondering why their blue water sailors are getting sicker than the boots on the ground guys. And they took it forth to do the study to find out what was going on with their Navy. And that was an awesome thing for them to do and take care of their people, their service members. But the U.S. does not want to go by the Australian findings. They said that they carried out their own scientific course, and that they found out that 40 years later that there's no proof of it, that Agent Orange affected anybody. But this is testing on stuff 40 years after the fact, so it's kind of hard to come to that conclusion.
You know, this is a show that, you know, like we had discussed earlier, you know, we don't get into politics
Yeah,
and all
yeah.
that, but let's face it, it is what it is. It's all politics.
Yep. I mean, we're just looking to get the guys, you know, who have served their country taken care of, you know. And I don't think the military did not spray this knowingly that we were going to get sick,
Yeah.
but we got the silent bullet here. We didn't get shot on the ground, but we did get shot by a chemical, you know, serving our country.
Angelina, when did you get involved?
Well, I mean, for me, my dad served in the Navy for 20 years. And I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here and speak for my dad, but you know, when he came back from Vietnam, it wasn't something that you talked about. It wasn't something that you bragged about. And he continued to be in the Navy, you know, for 20 years. And he's a simple man. He's a quiet man. He is a reserved man. You know, he would go to the doctor. They would tell him he had an ailment. He would take medication for it. And he just accepted it. It really wasn't until I said, we're not accepting this anymore. And I could see, especially in the last 3 or 4 years, you know, my father who could walk around and hold conversations and debate a little bit and answer the questions with the right answers on Jeopardy. Now he is a man who can't even hold a conversation. You know, he drools and his eye, you know, he has facial paralysis. It's hard. And now I'm angry. Luckily, there's, I've done a lot of research in the last 6 months, and there's still so much more that I just want to have answers to. But what's great for my dad is having Facebook. So though he might not be able to talk to people, and I don't think even before this he would have talked about Vietnam to people, but there are these groups on Facebook. You know, the Blue Water Navy Veterans Association has a group. So he's able to talk and then read about other stories. And though he might not have served on ships with some of these sailors that are in these Facebook groups, he's, you know, using some of the old Navy terms and language.
The common bond.
Yeah, and I know he's feeling good about that because you could never really talk about it.
Right.
You could never really talk about that war.
Well, that's the thing, is we all have a common bond. You know, we all served in a certain place. It's just like any other military guys. Maybe they served in Iraq together. Well, we served, you know, in our theater, and they served in there. So we have a common bond still to take care of each other if we can, you know?
And that's one thing that, I mean, if you just look at the VCOs, Veteran Service Organizations, may it be the VFW, the Legion, DAV, there is still that bond. Veterans always take care of their own.
Right.
And the community. I mean, it's not just their own. You know, I told you the time was going to fly by. And it's pretty much about a minute ago I got the 2-minute warning, a 3-minute warning. 2 minutes. I was just corrected. So you know, it was. There's so much more to talk about, and we're going to talk about it next week in the next segment, the part 2. I really want to thank each of you for being here. Angelina, thank you for being here. Chuck, Paul, thank you.
Thank
You know, we're used to being around a round table where I just kind of shake hands. I'm able to, you know, for the viewers, this is our new Veterans Corner set, and we're going to get a new. If you look at the Veterans Corner plaque on the front. That was when we first started, I think over 90 shows ago. Wow. So we're looking to increase, you know, make that, put another one up there, really try to enhance the show. We can now have 4 guests on here. Before it was only 3. But I want to say thank you on behalf of the Veterans Corner, the viewers. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your father's service. It truly is an honor. With that being said, want to thank our sponsors. We're already to that point. Like I said, these shows, they used to be 30 minutes long. Now they're 25. Not that 5 minutes is but it goes by fast. We'd like to thank one of our main sponsors. That's the American Legion family over at Post 209 in Forestville, and also to someone who's been very generous giving us money for the show, and that's Pam Shea. But I really want to thank them. Thank you again for being here. We're going to be back here again next week, another great show, and we'll have Jerry Wright on with us to really tie everything together. That's about all the time we have. I want to thank our guests for this evening, as I already have. I want to thank the viewers for joining us. I'm Chuck Wooden. See you next time on a Veterans Corner. Good night.